I would like to call to order the March 25th, 2021 regular board meeting. It is currently 6:34 p.m. Gail, is the virtual? Oh, I don't need the virtual thing because we're not virtual. Forgive me. Okay, Gail, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Kopsky?
Here.
Dr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Barron?
Here.
Mr. Eisen?
I need to try you.
Here.
Ms. Harris?
Here.
And Ms. Dixon Spivey?
Here. All right, I'd like to,
Hugo, can you check his microphone?
No, it's fine.
Oh.
Genius.
And turn down the volume.
Audio too.
all right, that should be okay, right?
Okay,
Thanks, guys.
sorry.
I move to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district, a legal counsel for the district, and independent contractors and specific volunteers, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity, and litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular district has been filed and is pending before a court administrative tribunal, or when the district finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding should be recorded and entered into the closed meeting minutes. And collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. Is there a second?
Second.
Gail, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Barron?
Yes.
Mr. Eisen?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Kopsky?
Yes.
Ms. Dixon Spivey?
Yes.
Thank
All
you.
right. We will now exit our open Zoom session and enter our closed meeting Zoom, which should be in our emails.
Hey, Sarah, should we be able to hear anything right now?
Yeah, we're unmuted now. You should be able to hear us. Is it coming through okay?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
All right, go ahead and mute the session.
Okay, I'm ready. I can't hear Sarah again.
Good now. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we can start this evening with our employee recognition of the month. Today, we're happy to recognize our employee recognition awardees for March. We have two categories: Teacher of the Month and Employee of the Month. So our first up is Courtney Treadwell. We'd like to congratulate her. She's been selected as Teacher of the Month. And here is what people who submitted the nominations had to say about Courtney. Courtney is a first-year English teacher. She was nominated by the family of a student who was in her honors African American literature class. And this is what they had to say. Her son benefited greatly from her ability to guide the class in questioning socially constructed goals, for example, race, class, gender, and sexual orientation. She was able to reach the students with a depth, touch, and compassion. We read the mission statement of the English department and believe she's clearly gone above and beyond to, quote, provide a nurturing, challenging, and equitable learning experience to ensure that all students develop into critical, creative, and empathetic readers, writers, and speakers, and thinkers. And OPRFHS is fortunate to have her on their team. Although our son graduates this year, we look forward to watching her start and continue to rise. So we do have a certificate of recognition. And we're very grateful to Courtney and all of the work that she's done, especially during such a difficult year. Is Courtney on? Courtney, is there anything that you would like to say?
Yes, thank you so very much. I'm very honored and I'm glad that I was able to be very impactful to the students. It's very a moment of gratitude, very much so.
We share appreciation as one of our newest teachers. So thank you so much for all your work.
Sarah, I don't know why I'm struggling again to hear you. I feel like I'm in the classroom all over again.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We had one
That's 'cause I'm
person,
on the-
it should be better now. Let's move forward and keep watching.
Okay, thank you. All right, Gina, can you hear me? Okay. Now I'd like to extend congratulations to our March Employee of the Month, Julie Elminger. Here is what people who submitted the nominations had to say about Julie. She is a secretary in our PE and Driver's Education Division, and she was nominated by one of our drivers ed teachers who had this to say: "Being a division secretary is never easy, but Julie has gone above and beyond her call of duty. She's done everything from learning new programs to dealing with emails and coordinating staff that are outside our school and division to help make driver education the best program it can be in these uncertain and scary times. She's very real and honest and brings so much to our department and division. We would not have been able to manage all the new responsibilities without the support and care of Julie. She is truly a gem who deserves recognition." So Julie's certificate should be displayed. Julie, thank you so much for all of your hard work and congratulations. Is there anything that Julie would like to say?
I just wanted to say thank you very much. Also, it's a big honor. I couldn't have gotten this far without all the help of the teachers and their organization also. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all of your work. Next item this evening is public comments. Well, I think we would like public comment, correct? Yes. Do we have any live public comments?
The first one is from Rick.
Yes, please.
Noreen Wooten.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity. And thank you to the board and staff and parents here. I hope this mask doesn't muffle the words too much. I have lived here in Oak Park for over 26 years, and my 3 children went through all of the elementary, junior, and high schools here. I've been a very happy parent here. I am also a retired teacher who taught in Chicago Public Schools for many years. And that's why I'm speaking today. I am speaking today because you are District 200 School Board and you have an elected school board. And I'm asking here for your support. I am part of a coalition of parent groups, community-based organizations, and unions that has been working for over a decade to achieve an elected school board in the city of Chicago. The legislation that we have crafted on the elected school board has, with legislators, has passed the Illinois House 3 times, and it's passed the Senate once, but it has never once made it to the governor's desk. The obstacle that we currently face is our state senator and Senate President, Don Harmon. Every district in Senate District 39, which is Don Harmon's district, has an elected school board, except Chicago. Every district in the state of Illinois has an elected school board, except Chicago. We've never had an elected school board. Under mayoral control, we have had a lot of problems. For example, in the last decade, over 100 schools closed, massive privatization in the form of charter schools, privatization in the form of privatized contracts. For example, you may have heard about the Aramark contract that turned out to be just a pretty bad deal for Chicago families. And basically, we just want to have democracy. We are asking, and I am here tonight, asking District 200 members and parents to support our efforts to win an elected representative school board. And further, I'm asking you if you will contact State Senator Don Harmon to let him know that democratic governance is the right thing to do and that the time is now for Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Person for public comment who is
Yes.
Mark.
Hello, my name is Mark Chang, and earlier this week I sent to the school board a letter signed by 125 parents and residents of Oak Park and River Forest, expressing concern over the recent wave of anti-Asian violence that's swept the country, and noting that one of the conditions that's enabled this violence is a lack of knowledge and representation of Asian Americans in American society, and especially in the school curriculum in most towns and cities in the United States. And I received a reply from the school board today and Superintendent Pruitt Adams, and I'm very pleased that you've expressed a willingness to help organize an event addressing the ignorance and the general lack of knowledge concerning Asian American history and culture, especially in Oak Park. And I actually just came from a rally that was organized by OPR students held in Scoville Park earlier this evening. I'm sorry you had to miss it. I hope you can see some of the coverage on the news tonight or tomorrow. It was a really powerful event, and it spoke to the students, spoke really eloquently to their experiences in the high school. And what they told were some very disturbing stories of the kind of general feeling of being marginalized, silenced, and experiencing a sense of invisibility. And they conveyed stories that reflected both a longstanding lack of material regarding Asian Americans in, really throughout the entire school system in Oak Park and River Forest. But also, even more disturbing to me, a kind of longstanding atmosphere of tolerance of casual racism against Asian Americans in our school system, both from fellow students, who unfortunately one might expect, but even more disturbingly from teachers. And, anecdotally, one student shared an experience that she had of a teacher using a racial slur in a class against Chinese people. I mean, not directed at anybody, but still. And when she tried to convey this to an administrator, she was told that she should go talk to the teacher about it. So she was being told as a student to talk to her teacher, whose class she was in, about racism. And frankly, that is just incredibly appalling. So I'm really glad that the Board of Education is beginning to take this issue seriously. It's a long-standing matter that parents and teachers have been trying to work on for over a decade at least, and experiencing a reaction of indifference and neglect. So the event that we're hoping to put together to help raise awareness will be the first step in this process, but I just want to emphasize that this is going to be a long process, and it's going to take a lot of work. And there are many people here who are willing to help out. We're very glad that the Board of Education is starting to take this first step. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Anyone else physically present here tonight who would like to make a public comment? I don't think so. Yeah, like we have some folks who had emailed their public comment as well. So I will keep time for you. I'll let you know if video has some minutes.
This is from Flo Schumacher. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, board members. I wanted to make a brief statement about the proposal to limit public comments on any one topic to a total of 20 minutes. Lengthy public comments are a symbol of an underlying problem. The underlying problem is that the members of this community feel that they are not being heard by the school administration. Long public comments represent a cry for help. They should serve as an opening to this board that something in the system is not working. By eliminating long public comments, you are addressing a symptom while permitting the underlying disease to run unchecked. Personally, I am heartened when I see you listening so carefully to what the public has to say. Thank you very much for all you do. This is from Jerry Dombrowski. Dear Superintendent and Board, now that the Oak Park River Forest teachers have been fully vaccinated and have run out of excuses to stay home, what is the date you have picked this semester to get them all in school and actually working? Why are you considering raises for people that have been working significantly less? When are the pay cuts coming? Is there any issue this board and superintendent won't spin to make it racial? How about the weather? Why don't board members Materi and Harris recuse themselves of all teacher contract matters? Member Harris works for the teachers union and member Materi, deceptively named Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, is funded by the teachers union. On what date will you exhaust the entire surplus the taxpayer provided? Viola's 101-year-old sister Jean shows up in person to basketball games with thousands of other fans. When will we see the board actually meet in person? It would set a good example. The next one is from Clay Cullen. Dear OPRF School Board, I was floored when I found out that today's board meeting is to discuss a pay raise across the board of 2.3%. In the time when taxpayers of Oak Park and River Forest have lost their jobs, made sacrifices to make ends meet, and do the right thing by paying our property taxes, we all do to take advantage of an historically stellar high school. It seems the only profession that is benefiting are administrators, managers, and non-affiliated professionals at OPRF. This is especially hard to take when children aren't full-time in school and probably won't be for the rest of the year. And summer school classes will be remote as well, with test score failing. In addition, approving a $500,000 balcony extension so kids have a place to go before and after school is almost too much to take. Is there any fiscally responsible representatives on the school board? The next one is from Monica Sheehan. Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to make a public comment this evening on agenda item 11.01 and respectfully request that the District 200 board discuss and vote on renovating all of the classrooms in Project 1 now, rather than leave 20 of them on hold for some unknown date in the future. The total cost of the 20 classrooms is $1.5 million. District 200 has an extra $2 million due to a budget surplus resulting from the pandemic that would more than cover the cost of the classroom renovations. This $2 million is in addition to the $90 million that's sitting in the school's cash reserves, with $20 million of it still earmarked for future facility improvements in Project 2, with its 37-meter by 25-yard pool housed in a 600-seat natatorium. When the District 200 board approved the construction project of Project 1 in December 2018, it was stated that it contained the school's priority academic and special education facility improvements. There is no reason to delay the renovation of these priority classrooms, as the school has the money, and the cost of these academic facility improvements will only increase as construction costs rise 3 to 4% annually. A question was raised in a recent District 200 campaign forum regarding the renovation of these classrooms, and every candidate expressed interest in completing all the classrooms in Project 1 now. I thank you for your time and consideration. The next one is from Bill Gale. With regard to agenda item 11.01, I am dismayed that 20 classrooms now appear to be omitted from the priority classroom academic improvements approved in 2018 for Project 1. Why are we spending money for balconies, yet omitting academics as promised? I urge the board to demonstrate its full commitment to OPRF academics before we move on to Project 2 and athletics. Janet Graff. I was very disappointed to receive a letter last week from Dr. Dixon, Director of Special Education, informing parents of site students will be fully remote this summer. The site program is located at the River Forest Community Center, not the high school. Site students would not be affected by the construction. SITE stands for Community Integrated Transition Education. I do not see how students can be integrated into the community when they are sitting in front of a computer at home, especially while the clock is ticking until the time they age out. I ask the board to reserve this decision for SITE students, especially when stakeholders, SITE parents, or students were not consulted when the special education administration made this decision. Thank you. From Marty Bernstein, good evening. My comment is regarding agenda item 11.01, bid period 6 electrical bid update. This item in the Imagine OPRF plan reduces 38 classroom renovations to 18. I do not understand the reasoning behind this decision or who in the administration made the decision to cut more than half the classroom renovations to some future time. If it is a matter of funding, the 20 classrooms in danger of being eliminated can be converted with money saved due to the pandemic. If funding isn't the question, I do not understand why this is being considered. Moving this work to the future will surely make the work more expensive. I recommend the board reject this plan of inaction and instead direct the administration to go forward with all 38 classrooms renovations. Thank you. The next one is from Anja Herman. Dear Board of Education, my name is Anja Herman. I live in River Forest. I am a current freshman here at OPRF. I am here today to voice opposition for the restructuring of the special education department, specifically because none of the students are in special education who would be affected by this restructuring were given a chance to give their opinions or share their voices or thoughts about this restructuring. Those of us in the disability community have a saying, nothing about us without us, which is meant to discourage decisions that impact us without actually letting us have a say in these decisions. The student disability community at OPRF deserves to be treated like vital members of the larger OPRF ecosystem, and our voices deserve to be heard, amplified, and respected. Please retool your restructuring plans to implement the feedback from the disability community. They are the population who suffer from this proposed restructuring best. The next one is from Fred Arkin. Thank you to the Board of Education and Administration for not including the restructuring of the special education department in their staffing recommendations on tonight's agenda. I trust the district will take an appropriate course by including all stakeholders and the community in any discussion regarding any structural change in special education. Please take this opportunity this evening to revoke your previous decision to move forward with construction of the balcony. Please revert to the student-focused needs analysis encompassed in the Imagine long-term facilities plan by prioritizing documented needed classrooms as originally contemplated. I will go further and request not only omitting the balcony, but go forward with the full complement of classrooms by including alternatives 6A and 6B. Finally, last week, a notice went out to all coaches from Athletic Director John Stelzer that the building would be closed for the summer and all indoor camps would be canceled. This decision is a candidate for the Bad Decision Hall of Fame. What happened to the district being student-focused? Our students have been sequestered in their homes for a year. Just now, they're starting to venture out and participating in their chosen activities. Excuse me. We all know the social and emotional toll that the pandemic has taken on our students. They need to be involved with their sport, teammates, and coaches. This decision seems like one of convenience, as there is no Project One work to be done south of the South Hallway. In this time of crisis, as we move towards normalcy, we need to expand programming and inclusion to provide healthy and safe opportunities for our students to interact. And one more. I urge you, and this is from Bruce Kleiman, I urge you to complete phase 1 of the Imagine project, specifically renovate the 20 classrooms which were originally planned for renovation, but for some reason are not. My impression also is that most of the candidates for the upcoming District 200 election agree that these classrooms should be renovated now. Please, please reconsider. After all, the foundational mission of our school is, and I am sure you will agree, education. Thank you. That's it.
That's a prayer request.
Oh,
That's
yes,
a place.
we had 5 FOIA requests and 4 resolved. Thank you.
And now we have Meg McAndrews for her student council update to the board.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Maeve McAndrews, and I'm the Student Council Board Rep. I'm excited to be here tonight and tell everybody about some of our plans for Charity Month coming in April and the rest of the school year. Currently, Student Council is planning to host another cookie night with River Forest chef Peter Schonman. On Monday, April 12th, we will host a Zoom for interested students and possibly staff if we have low student attendance. And Mr. Schonman will teach us how to make a one-pot dinner type of meal, probably with some chicken or sausage and maybe some vegetables in there too. He will also teach students about some basic cooking tips like how to cook pasta correctly, just to really help them once they go off to college and they're on their own and don't have people really helping them do all that. So all of this information will be sent out to students the week in advance so they can have a chance to sign up for it and buy any ingredients that they need. Student Council is also planning some ways to reach out and help the community for Charity Month. We are planning to write letters to Brookdale Nursing Home, and hopefully we can just raise the spirits of some residents there with our letters. And we hope that a lot of Student Council members will write some letters and help some people out. Additionally, we are looking into possible days where members can, and other even community members just from Oak Park and River Forest can pick up trash around the area and just clean up the community. Student Council is continuing to think about some other ways we can support the community while also really focusing on everyone's health and safety. Recently, some students have reported that they have experienced confusion concerning the saliva test drop-off dates. Students participating in sports, driver's ed, and other after-school activities, in addition to participating in hybrid learning, are confused about the double drop-off days. They are usually dropping off saliva tests for their hybrid days and maybe like every Friday or Monday for their extra after-school curricular activity. And they were kind of wondering if there is a way to reduce the amount of days they're submitting saliva and maybe, for example, just drop it off on Friday, or if this isn't possible, just like send out an email making it really clear, like the schedule for when they should drop everything off. And additionally, Student Council wants to focus on recognizing and celebrating current seniors in the coming months, just since they're graduating soon, and we feel like we haven't done enough for them recently with their entire senior year being taken away basically by COVID. So we want to plan some fun events, or maybe like give some spirit gear or some fun stickers to show the school's appreciation for the senior class. And I will just make sure to continue updating you all as we come up with more ideas for that. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak on behalf of Student Council and the student body. And I hope everyone here has a really great spring break.
Thank you so much, Meg. We hope you have a great spring break too.
Thank you, Mary. At last month's board meeting, I reported that we had successfully launched our hybrid learning plan. This month, I'm even more happy to share some more good news. Following spring break, we plan to bring students on campus for classes much more frequently than our current schedule. We will be able to go down to 1 or 2, depending on the student change request for cohorts. This will allow students to attend in-person classes either 2, 3, or possibly every day in a week. The option to significantly reduce the number of cohorts is a result of the new joint guidance issued by the State of Illinois Board of Education and the Illinois Department of Public Health. The guidance revises socially distanced requirements to no less than 3 to 6 feet for students and fully vaccinated staff, or 6 feet for staff who are not fully vaccinated. However, other guidelines remain the same. Staff and students must wear face coverings at all times in classrooms and shared spaces, and must observe other safety practices. We have measured our classroom capacity, and programmers are running algorithms to determine what is possible. We will have definitive information to share the week of April 5th. Now for some announcements. Our boys and swim dive team won its second consecutive West Suburban Silver Conference Championship. The Science Olympiad team placed 5th in their region. Alex Schrader, Maya Lowenthal, and Bridget Parker have qualified for the National Speech and Debate Association Academic All-Star Award for having accrued more than 750 NSBA points. Also, junior student athlete Josephine Wellen earned All-American status at the Adidas Indoor Nationals. She finished 4th in the 2 mile with a 10.17 and 5th in the mile with 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Her 2 mile time is number 7 all time in Illinois history. Senior softball player Maddie Grant, congratulations to her for making the 2021 PFG High School All-American watch list. And finally, hope this helps you with your request. We want to thank our seniors and families for your patience as we work on making plans for graduation. We expect to be able to announce our plans as soon as we return from spring break. And also, we will be with the new schedule realigning our Solana spring program. That concludes my announcement.
Great, thank you, Dr. Adams. Next, we have approval of the consent items. I'm going to pull item 8.07. Are there any other items the board members would like to hold? I move to approve the following consent items. Open and close minutes of the February 25th, March 11th, 18th, 22nd, 23rd, 2021 minutes. And declaration that the closed session audio tapes of May 2019 be destroyed. 8.02, personnel recommendations, new hires, retirements, and resignations. 8.03, the presentation of monthly financial reports. 8.04, presentation of the monthly treasurer's report. 8.05, approval of check disbursements and financial resolutions. 8.06, did you want to pull that down?
I wanted to pull that. I had it numbered the wrong number.
Yeah, that's fine. So we're pulling 8.06 as well. All right, and then lastly for the consent for the motion is 8.08, 2021 to 2022 for food service pay rate increase. Is there a second?
Second.
Gail, could you please call it roll?
Mr. Isley,
Yes.
Mr. Martieri,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Barron,
Yes.
and Ms. Dixon Snyder.
Yes. All right, so now we have item 8.06, it's the Valor Technologies abatement contract. I move that we approve the Valor Technologies contract in the amount not to exceed $308,700. Is there a second?
Second.
Second?
So my question is, I too am, it was mentioned, I'm disturbed that activities for students in the building are being canceled or displaced, and want to understand how specifically this contract and this work relates to the cancellation of that, and or if there are other conflicting areas, I'd like a better picture of the cost.
It's only abatement. We have the electrical work going on, it's gonna be dropped for the next couple of years. So we'll have our mass notification system that'll be down, the fire alarm system will be down. And so if students are in the building and there's a fire or anything happens, there will be no notifications. That's part of it. So the abatement is part of it. All different projects are tied into one another.
Have we looked at alternatives to, again, housing the activities needed so that, you know, especially with pandemic, our students can participate, whether it's other facilities beyond this month?
It's my understanding that the season is over June 19th.
Yes.
And students will still have access to the facility through June 19th. And it should be pretty much ready for sports in the fall. But the work that has to be done is actually starting in the spring break. As Mr. Anderson indicated, it is the emergency system, it's fire alarms, smoke alarms. There's quite a bit of work that has to be done. The decision was made under the notion of safety for our students. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, thanks. Regarding the activities after June 19th, between June 19th and August 9th, yes, we are looking at other sites to potentially house those activities. I've asked Mr. Stelter to put together a list and meet with his coaches and figure out what might be able to be done. It's not done at this point. What that might look like, but that is
And Greg, if I could add, I know this is not part of the construction, but if we could also make sure that we're looking for alternative sites for the extended school year students.
yes, and absolutely. Actually, Dr. Brad is going to know more about that conversation.
It's in the meeting.
I'm also, good evening, everyone. This is Mrs. Francois Blue. We actually did look at a couple of different sites, alternative sites. And one of them included the church Pilgrim across the street. One of the spaces that we were looking at actually was a space that was on the first floor. That would have been students that were wheelchair, that had needed wheelchair access, could have potentially used, but then there was some issues of accessing the bathrooms on the first floor, and then the noise of the chapel, the noise across the hall as they're tuning the pianos and stuff like that take place during the day, because there are other activities and stuff that take place in the church during the day. The other component of it was that our staff is all summer school staff is working remote. The other part was that we needed to make sure that if any event that staff needed access to the building for support, whether it was technology or anything like that, their ability to gain access to the building pretty quickly was going to be impacted by the construction as well. We also looked at another space that was currently under contract for their spaces for the next 2 years. So there was a couple of different avenues that we were trying to pursue in the event that we could have staff working over the summer for ESY. But there were some other factors, and especially in terms of how we get access to the building to get staff and students any supports or anything that they needed during that construction was a part of that discussion.
I take it that District 97 has no facilities available?
There was also the conversation of that too, as well, in terms of any of their middle school buildings. The other part that comes into play of that is that our staff is right now are working remotely. So we would have needed to go back into negotiating any staff working in person for ESY. And that would have been taking a lot more time to try to plan for and negotiate that working in person.
I'm sorry, I don't have that answer. Are the facilities available or no? For D97, have they told us that they're not available?
We don't, the facilities at D97, they are running some summer programs, but we would have to make sure that we checked with their head of buildings and ground to see if any of their middle schools, as well as with the principal, which we are more than happy to follow up on and do. But the other part of that is our staff is working remote.
Of course, but we can certainly attempt negotiations with the staff before we foreclose that opportunity. So I would hope the administration will look into it for all summer school students, but especially special ed. I've gotten us off track. Anybody else? Okay, questions? All right.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Barron,
Yes.
Mr. Isley,
Yes.
Mr. Martieri,
Yes.
Ms. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Kowski,
Yes.
and Ms. Dixon Spivey.
Yes. All right, our next item is 8.07. Second to get organized here. All right, and move to approve the salary increases for administrators, managers, and non-affiliated employees for the 2021-2022 school year. As discussed in closed session on March 11, 2021, and today with the noted market-based exceptions that we raised in closed session. Is there a second?
Second.
I assume no discussion. Gail, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Barron,
Yes.
Mr. Isley,
Yes.
Mr. Martieri,
Yes.
Ms. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Kowski,
Yes.
Dr. Moore,
Yes.
and Ms. Dixon Spivey.
Yes.
The first item 901 is a multi-tiered system of support for social, emotional, and behavior development in PSS, SEB. Making this presentation is Ms. Linda Parker, Director of Student Support Services, Kristen McKee, Coordinator for Learning Analytics, and Mr. Grant Johnson, Associate Superintendent. At the conclusion of the presentation, this item comes for information, and it is in compliance with strategic plan priority 2 transformative. Johnson, Ms. Parker, and Ms. McKee.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. I'm going to turn this over to Linda Parker and her team in just 1 second, but I want to throw a bit of context out there. A year ago, when this board approved the shift from our student code of conduct to the behavior education plan, we talked about the need for multi-tiered systems of support for social, emotional, and behavioral needs for our students. At that point, we stated that it was in development and it works. And Linda and her team have been working diligently over the past year to develop this as a way to help encourage, to help support our students in a variety of ways. So with that said, Linda Parker, take it away.
Thank you, Greg. Good evening, board. And thank you for this opportunity to share our plan for the multi-tiered system of support for our social, emotional, and behavioral development of our students. We're going to start first with the why this was necessary, as Greg has kind of outlined for us at the beginning. And then you will hear different voices throughout this presentation because my entire team is here, the current team in its format, to explain the different levels that we're going to be talking about in terms of implementation. Next slide. So just as an overview, we want to understand that not only had we been talking about needing to refine our systems in the past, the pandemic has only served to amplify our needs to have some evidence-based supports and interventions available to target the social, emotional, and behavioral needs of our students. As we know that the students that left our building in March of last year are not going to be the students who return when we're back full in person, and we have to have specific supports in place to effectively handle and efficiently handle all of our students' needs, in which case are at this point heightened because we've all been hearing about how the mental health of everyone has been challenged during these times. Our work here is to break down the silos of our social, emotional, and behavioral supports so that they are cohesive in a school-wide model, because we know they happen in our building and we want to make sure that they're happening with purpose and with efficiency. We plan to use a universal proactive screening process to detect the subset of students who will need more than what our tier 1 supports will be able to offer. We want to make sure that that is done in a way that is responsive to students of all races. So it's very important to us that race is on the table in this process, so that we are making sure that we have equity in our detection of student needs. We plan to be data-driven in order to have a goal-oriented decision-making process and delivery of our supports. Very important that we are working to set goals for students and then measuring whether or not they have met those goals, and then deciding what next level of help they need, or if they have succeeded in reaching all of their goals. And lastly, to make sure that we include progress monitoring in order to do that. So we've been very intentional in terms of the systems that we have put in place, and that will be described as we continue to go on. Next slide.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alexis Iliadi. I'm the Multi-Tiered Systems of Support Coordinator. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on is how much of our research going into this work has really highlighted how our equity work and our MTSS work go hand in hand as we're talking about our social and emotional and behavioral supports. So on this slide, you'll see both our definition of MTSS and our definition of equity. And really what that's leading us to is thinking about this in the framework of equity-based MTSS. So we're thinking about one system, tiered support, that's informed by data, designed for success, and has acknowledged voice. And if we can move to the next slide, you'll see some of the most current research that we've seen. So on here, this is just some of the most current research around equity-based MTSS. Just to highlight that last point, saying equity-based MTSS implemented with fidelity is positively correlated with educational equity. And that is really an overarching goal of all of this work as we go into it. And we can move into the next slide.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sherilyn McLeod. I am the trauma-informed school interventionist, beginning of this school year. And I want to talk to you all about the intersectionality of trauma-informed care and MTSS. And so if you look at the graphic that's there, it shows that the work of trauma-informed is on the outside. As you move closer in, MTSS is there. And that shows that trauma-informed care is more universal. We want to make sure that from the crosswalk outside of the school, throughout the school, into the hallways, cafeterias, that students feel supported and that our staff and our building is trauma-informed and caring to work hard to not re-traumatize students as they go through the building. And the MTSS work begins right along with it. For that universal tier 1 work that we're doing, we want to make sure that we have organizational commitment, which is from the board and our administrators. We want to make sure that we are preparing our faculty and staff with the supportive training and ensuring that everyone feels comfortable throughout the building to support our students as they return, particularly during times of COVID-19. And then we want to make sure that it's not just the voices of adults, but the voices of students and families are amplified as we go through this work, and aligning our policies and programs so that the trauma-informed principles are infused and melted with all of the work that we're doing, whether it's in the classroom, in the boardroom, and throughout our school. And then, as Alexis stated, utilizing data to ensure that we are moving the needle in the way that it needs to go and that we're pushing school-wide change, and then being able to go back and be evaluative and make sure that we are evaluating our work and open to changing and moving along with as our students are coming back and showing different signs that we can be flexible in the support of our students and our faculty and staff. Next slide.
So what we're going to move into from the why is now the how this will happen. And I want us to hear that every individual in our building will have a role in this plan. Because in order for it to be a universal plan and a school-wide plan, we know that that takes the collaboration of everyone in the building, working to make sure that this is happening. So we are going to move now into explaining the tiers of this service that we're going to be providing and supports within our building.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ginger Colamusi. I am our Prevention and Wellness Coordinator, and I'm going to kick off sharing with you about our Tier 1 system of supports. So keeping in mind our very large and diverse OPRF school community, we believe it is critical to have a robust school-wide SEL plan, so that's our Tier 1, to support the social, emotional, and behavioral development of all of our students, and particularly our students of color who have historically felt marginalized and disconnected within our school. Therefore, our Tier 1 plan includes multiple types of instruction and supports, as you can see here, geared towards increasing school connectedness and belonging, opportunities for meaningful and culturally affirming participation, and core SEL skill development for our most marginalized student populations. And these various types of instructions and supports do not and should not need to be sought out by our students themselves. Rather, they will be embedded into all students' daily routines and experiences throughout their school day, such as within their academic classes and advisory spaces. Next slide, please. Here we have identified 3 SEL competencies to guide the development of our Tier 1 plan. They are self-awareness and self-management skills, relationship skills, and decision-making skills. These have been identified by merging CASEL's core competencies with ISBE's social emotional learning standards. And it's our goal that all students will develop these skills through our Tier 1 programming. Next slide. One more, go ahead. Thank you. So while we know there are many ways that OPRF already supports our students' wellness, our students' social emotional development, a positive school climate, we also know there are still areas where we can grow and improve the supports we provide to all of our students. So here I just want to highlight for us a few areas of need that stand out from our most recent Illinois Youth Survey from spring 2020. All of our students completed that just maybe a week or so before school shut down last March. And we can only assume as we're looking at these numbers that they've increased since this pandemic experience. So on this slide, you'll see one of our indicators for mental, social, and physical health, and the number of our students or the percentage of our students who identify feeling sad or hopeless. Let's move to the next slide. This is one of our indicators for school climate and school connectedness, and it shows the percentage of students who disagree to this statement. So it is students who do not feel close to other people at this school. Next slide. Again, another indicator for school climate and school connectedness. Again, students who disagree with the statement. So this is the percentage of students who indicate they do not feel happy to be at our school. Next slide. This is the last indicator under school climate and school connectedness. Again, students who disagree with this statement, so students who do not feel safe at our school. And then we have one more data point. Next slide. This is school climate, but under meaningful participation. These are the number of students who do not feel like they get to help decide things during their school day, like class activities or rules. So you'll notice for all of these data points that they were not small numbers or percentages of our students. For each question, it was about 1/3 of our students, or in some cases, nearly half of our students, indicating that more support is needed in these areas. And so that's why it's important that we have a robust Tier 1 plan that supports all of our students, in addition to having a strong Tier 2 and Tier 3 plan to support our students with greater needs. I'll now pass it over to Nabiha, who's going to share an outline of our Tier 1 plans.
Thank you, Ginger. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nabiha Kalkadawala, and I am a member of the General Education Social Work team. So particularly in light of everything that we've been dealing with over the past year, this Tier 1 plan is designed with the end in mind, What skills should an OPRF graduate possess in order to be a successful contributing member of society? Just thinking about the data that you just saw from Ginger, and talking about, we are using the CASEL's School Implementation Guide as the basis for our rollout. CASEL has identified a number of key indicators, which you see here on the left-hand column of the next few slides. For each of the indicators at the Tier 1 level, we've identified how we as a high school will address this as a part of our overall universal plan. This plan is really designed to help teachers continue to infuse SEL. We know that it's happening in lots of places throughout the building, notably community building and connectedness into all aspects of the classroom, including academic content and the advisory time. This plan is designed to build on what teachers already know by showcasing best practices across the building while providing supplemental support on a consistent basis. For example, through the use of selected lessons from Umoja's advisory curriculum, we intend to give voice to students' social identities. Specifically, the lessons will explore racial identity as a component of social identity to help students think about their experience of race and how they are received in the world based on their race. Teachers will use the Restorative Conversations Checklist, which is a resource from Umoja, as a tool to help them have better conversations that acknowledge students' lived experiences. This plan will also increase opportunities for student voice to be included and showcased. If you can think back to that slide about students talking about whether or not they felt like they had a voice in activities or in rules in their spaces, we want students to learn how to facilitate circles, lead SEL activities, and help build relationships in ways that feel not only authentic to them, but also empower them to create positive change in our school community. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, go back one. As you can see, Umoja is a crucial part of our professional development and implementation plan. Teachers will be encouraged to use proactive restorative practices, including community building circles and classroom norms. Again, we want to have the same language being used throughout the building. The ongoing PD support is also designed to draw awareness to racial bias as it affects who is being referred to Tier 2 supports. As a school team, we are constantly seeking research-based interventions that are culturally sensitive, rather than those that have not been viewed from that lens. Next slide, please. And finally, we will continue to intentionally approach behavior management from a positive or a strengths base. Through both our attendance and behavior education interventions, we seek to be asset-focused rather than deficit-based or punitive in nature. I'd like to hand it over to Alexis and Andrea to talk more about Tier 2.
Okay, so now if we go on to the next slide, we're going to start talking about how we're going to identify our students who have received all of the Tier 1 social and emotional behavioral supports that we will have embedded throughout our building, but still are identified as needing more. And so when we're talking about our Tier 2 population, we're really talking about 10 to 25% of our students who need additional instruction and support around our social and emotional and behavioral development plan. So on the right, you'll see a list of interventions. We're going to talk a little bit more about those in a couple slides, but first I'm going to pass it over to Andrea to talk about how we are going to start identifying our students for these supports. Next slide.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Newman. I'm one of the deans. I am going to talk about how we are going to identify students who may be in need for more intensive intervention based on the data we have and that we can use. So we plan to use an evidence-based, culturally sensitive, social emotional screener to determine which students are in need of more intensive intervention. So there's 3 different data points we plan to use to identify those students. The first is our early warning system data, which utilizes attendance, grades, and discipline data to determine which students are at risk and we may need to administer the screener for. The second way would be a referral through our pupil support system. And that's staff that are working with our students on a very close close level and have relationships with the students. And so they can also put a referral in for the screener to be administered. And the final way would be through a teacher nomination form. So if teachers are seeing behaviors in their classroom or have concerns about students, they can also nominate students for us to consider administering the screener to. And all of these would be entry points for us to use to administer the social emotional screener. And then this will ensure that data will drive who receives the more intensive intensive interventions in a really systematic way. So in turn, the interventions will be provided in a more equitable way also. Next slide.
So our process for intervention implementation, as Andrea was just saying, we have these 3 areas of the funnel that we are identifying students through: our early warning systems data, our teacher nomination, and our PSS referral. And regardless which way a student comes down that funnel, those students will be identified for our targeted screener. Once the targeted screener is administered, our PSS teams will use that information. So use our entry point data, looking at our early warning systems data and the reason for referral, along with the feedback we're getting from the screener, to help us match the student with the appropriate level of intervention before we then move into our intervention implementation plan. And if we go on to the next slide. Okay, so here is where we really start breaking down, looking at our tier 2 interventions. And we break these down into 2 different areas: our acquisition-based interventions and performance-based interventions. And so on the left, as we're talking about acquisition-based interventions, we're really looking at matching students who don't have the skills they need with skill instruction, SEL, social and emotional skill building groups, to help them develop and learn the skills that they need to show competency in the social or emotional or behavioral area that we've identified through our entry point data and our screening data. So you'll see on the bottom of that left-hand side in orange, the 5 different areas that we're looking to develop, to have some social and emotional skill building groups that will be led by our social work team. And in each of these areas, one of the big things that our team has been really focusing on is keeping our equity work at the forefront in terms of how we're vetting our curriculums, and making sure that the curriculums we're selecting for these are culturally responsive and have been shown in evidence base with multiple populations that would meet our needs at OPRF. On the right-hand side, you'll see we have our performance-based interventions. And this is for students who they have the skills, but maybe they're not using the skills. So when we think about this as a can't do or a won't do, these are more of our students who they have the skills, they're just not showing the behavior. So we're looking at students who might be avoiding academic work, might need more adult attention, aren't having a sufficient opportunity to interact with peers, are showing some off-task behaviors, or maybe just need some more positive reinforcement. And so our goal is to be able to use all of our entry point data to make sure that we're matching kids with the appropriate intervention based on their need. And this is really just beefing up the tools we have in our toolbox to do that. And we can move on to the next slide.
So beyond tier 2, we understand that there's going to be a fraction of our student population who will need more intensive individualized supports. Those you will see listed here in terms of what we're doing, but that is a very small population, and it will definitely be more intensive as we work with student and family to resolve those concerns, to decide if there's something else even beyond that that is necessary. Next slide.
Okay, so thinking about how we measure our progress and success, we will be using our entry data, how we've identified the student for intervention, along with our entry screening data as our baseline data. And then as we've placed student into an intervention, we will be using progress monitoring data that will have curriculum-based measurement. And we also have a progress monitoring tool that is embedded with our screener to look at the area that we had identified and monitor how students are developing those skills. We will also be doing intervention fidelity checks to make sure that we are implementing our interventions with fidelity. Are we using our curriculums the way they were intended to be used? And at the end of intervention, we'll be reviewing the data with PSS teams to determine whether or not the student has successfully met their goal and will be exited from intervention, or are we recommending further intervention for that student? Next slide.
Good evening, I'm Kristen McKee, Coordinator of Learning Analytics and Supports. Here's our logic model that outlines how we understand the work as a part of the strategic plan and how we will measure and monitor our implementation and progress. Our overarching goal is to build and implement a robust MTSS model. As you can see that on the left, moving left to right, we see what inputs to the system we need for implementation, such as administrative support, training, alignment to our BEP goals, and also a survey that is responsive to our goals. Then in adult capacity outcomes, what adult practices need to occur and how will we know that they have occurred? Next slide, please. This section shows of the same model of what we want to see in terms of successful implementation and how we will measure the progress toward the goals. Several of these measurements are criterion reference benchmarks of success. I do feel that this is a working document that we will understand better as continuous improvement, as a continuous improvement model. As we grow in our learning, how we measure our success will evolve as well. And finally, our desired long-term outcome is a positive, equitable school community, our students acquiring and strengthening SEL competencies, and that students of all racial backgrounds experience increased connectedness and belonging. Next slide.
So we are currently an 8-person team, of those of whom you've heard 6 of this evening. But we will be growing our team because we know the importance of having even more voice from adults and students within this, that's inclusive of our teachers. So that as we put together this framework, we can start to see it grow and build in terms of how we'll get started and how we'll make things go. So that is the conclusion of our presentation.
Thorough presentation. Board members, I'm going to start with
Gina and Jackie, do either of you have any questions or comments concerning the presentation?
I'd actually like to go last, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm happy to kick things off. Thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate the including the whole aspect of what this past year, what that may have done to our school community and the needs that there will be for more supports. And with that, one of my questions just has to do with how this model, in terms of the estimations of who will need the various tiers of support, is that based on, is that factoring in this past year of COVID and Black Lives Matter and remote learning?
Yes, one of the things you heard mentioned is we were talking about a robust tier 1 is our acknowledgement over the fact that a lot of our students are presenting more as tier 2 because of everything that's going through. But truly, the tiers have just kicked up to other levels. So the majority of our population is sitting more at a, let's say, a 1+. I won't call it a 2. And so the robust tier 1 that we are planning is to address that, so it's universal throughout the entire building, in order to catch those students who just need that as universal support and not a special intervention.
So and I just, because I don't have the prior examples of what was included in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So these tier 1 supports include some things that were before tier 2.
Well, and by that meaning, for example, you hear us mentioning about having school-wide norms, like having something that, is across the building wide, understood by students as to what it means to be a Husky and who they are and how they're appreciated in this environment. The use of our Emoja tools within our classrooms in order to build community and actually work in circle practice when necessary with students in the classroom. And then also using student facilitation of those tools as well, so that they see their voice working in those spaces. That's going to be upcoming because of course we have to get everyone prepared for that, but we're looking to see it more integrated fully within the building so that students are feeling it in all of their spaces. And then the adults understand from whatever role we have at the building that we're all implementing these, whether we're in the hallway or in classrooms, like it's all of our responsibility to make sure students feel that community throughout the building.
Okay, and just a last question, and I will let others ask. I have more, of course, but I'm going to be not so greedy. In terms of the SEL work, and I heard you say that there will be an increase in those that are contributing to this plan. And when we talk about SEL, and I always go to, at our school, someone who is considered a national expert, and that is Avi Lessing. And I'm curious as to why his work and the grant, that the $100,000 grant that was received, why that wasn't used to develop this.
Very good question. And the reason we're growing it is because we knew when we first started that we had to create a framework, so that once we had a framework, we would have something to build within that, and it would be a firm foundation. We actually are in the process of doing invitations to individuals, and the person you named is actually on our list to contact, because we want to now, as we fill in the infrastructure, making sure that we have those as work that can add to this work that we've already put in for the framework. So we are expecting to add teachers, and he is actually one that we're going to be inviting. It's an invitation that we're sending out to the entire staff, because we want to know who is interested in being involved in this work as we develop it for school-wide usage.
Okay, thank you. I would have imagined that he would have not been invited, but and this is just from prior presentations and knowing the that work, that we have an expert in-house. So I'm just surprised that there's an invitation going out as opposed to a direct, this is someone, not a consultant, already here and willing to do that kind of work. So that's just my surprise. Thank you.
Jackie, I think also we have to understand this too as a level of interventions and supports, and where a lot of the work really does have to happen in the classroom level and the SEL as a part of our instruction, as a part of, as we've been saying, how we do business. And we definitely will need that type of support that Avi's been offering to coach the teachers, to understand where those impacts are in the classroom, in the instruction. I think one of the things about this model that we're trying to implement here is also to understand how we're being more diagnostic within our delivery of services throughout the tiers. So as you move up the tiers, when you get into tier 2 and you get into certainly tier 3, you start having a more targeted and more diagnostic, more intervention delivery with social workers, with people who have that type of training through that tiered model. So absolutely the SEL work that Avi and the coaches and people have been doing are really critical in that tier 1, in that foundation. I think one of the things that we want to make sure everybody hears tonight is that this is also how we move up the tiers of intervention, what those interventions are, and who are the service delivery members that can provide those. And many times those are people who have a type 73 or a licensed social worker psychologist, or somebody who's been specialized to deliver those services throughout the tiers of intervention. So I think that that's why we say we're inviting it now, is because we're trying to understand what is that framework to move up, how are we using a screening tool and other even assessments that get at mental health and mental wellness and different how trauma has impacted students and how that treatment plan occurs, then, you know, those are the things that we really wanted to make sure the system we're rolling out isn't just these silos and these pockets. And that's really what this work has been. And now what we're trying to do is really develop those robust tiers. This is currently a framework. The tiers really have to be brought to a more robust, the way that we live it in all the tiers, And that this is what I'm really proud of, and actually something that I've been wanting to see a long time here at Oak Park, is that we actually have a cohesive model. So now the work that Avi can do is a part of a system, not just like, oh, he's doing this over here, we're doing something over here, and then maybe that gets to a social worker. All of this is us coming together. And that's really the part that I find the most inspiring where we're at. But I really also know that we're at the beginning of this process. And so we have a lot of room for development. And of course, like the people who are doing that level of work will be invited.
Jackie, did you have any other questions?
No, thank you very much.
Ralph?
So I appreciate the focus on evidence-based approaches that you're taking. I'm very concerned when I looked through the slide deck when we got the materials, when almost half of the students in 10th and 11th grade are saying they're not happy to be at the school. That jumped off of the page when I went through this. And I wonder what my question is really more focused on, a combination of that and the high data points where students didn't feel like they were engaged at all in class activities to, 3/4. So I know that approaches to dealing with both of those issues involve culturally relevant pedagogy that get the students to bring their life experiences into the classroom and give the students a say about how their class is structured and how they're going to demonstrate their mastery of the academic content that they're being instructed in. So I'm wondering if that's going to be part of this or embedded in this going forward. And the second thing I wonder about is the level of professional development you are going to need to really get SEL embedded in the classroom and address these issues, so that we go from having almost half of our kids not being happy to attend the school and not feeling like they have a say in anything that's going on in their academic activities, to flipping that switch and having at least 90%, 95% of our kids, surveying saying they're happy to be coming to the OPRF school, and 3/4 of our kids saying they do feel like they're engaged in the classroom and have something to say about it. Those were my main points. I actually agreed with everything Dr. Moore pointed out too. So thank you for making those statements, Dr. Moore. That means I didn't have to make them.
Thank you, Ralph. Tom?
Hear me? So I just had a clarifying questions kind of related to what Ralph was saying, and it's more on the Illinois Use Survey data. Can you please clarify, when was this data taken? And, do we have any, historical look? We're in a pandemic, and just what we've seen prior year to this year. It doesn't change the whole excellent work being done, but it would be appreciated knowing when this data was assembled. Thank you.
I can actually answer that quickly. The LIS survey is done every other year at OPRF. That's just on the surveys assigned, and we do it. This was taken actually just prior to last March, so we were able to wrap it up just before the pandemic. I don't know if, yeah, thanks.
Yes, that's correct. And then context is everything, because timing, when you think about it's winter and it's closer, like between needing a break at spring break, sometimes that affects how students are feeling in school during that time. So like all of that goes into consideration as they're answering.
Did that answer your question about longitudinal data?
Yeah, we have done this survey in previous years. So the last time prior to this one would have been, 17, 18 or something like that. So we are able to go back and get that data. We got it. So. But because of the context, you asked that question specifically to see if there's like, I would imagine if there's a difference because of pandemic reasons right here, but exactly right.
Yeah, I guess building on that a little bit, and this is something that I think in absolute numbers here, probably in terms of these charts, I think everybody here probably had the same reaction to it. But I guess the question I had was, why don't we see any relative numbers? I mean, I don't know what is typical for high school students of this age at this time in the survey. And we have really no comparisons there. Why wouldn't we do that? Or I'm trying to understand, is there a reason we didn't do that?
You actually just took the words out of my mouth that, one of the things that's missing in this is that we don't have the relative, we don't have it compared to what teenagers typically will report, right? And that matters. But I think for us, it also really matters that these numbers feel not good, right? And so I don't want to, while I think it is always important to give relative, I think that at the same time, we can look at this and say, yeah, these don't feel good no matter what. We want to be lower across the board. So I think that I appreciate that. And I think that that's something that we can definitely present in the future. I also don't want to take away that these numbers feel good.
Yeah, and I want to take that the next step further. In your second to last slide, or your last slide, you talk about some outcomes in terms of things that you're interested in achieving, which is basically you have these numbers and say we'd like them all above 80%.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I would ask, is that a feeling number or is that an evidence-based number that they should be there?
In terms of schools, the way that MTSS and RTI sort of to understand is that you want to see a strong base of at least 80% of your students reporting these positive feelings. Because the thought is that as a school, as a system, that means we have a healthy core. And so, that if 20% of our students are reporting, unfavorable results, then that's a much easier number to intervene on than what you're seeing in those other results. So really, it's really sort of the way that the MTSS world kind of does business. It's also a strong improvement over the numbers that you saw in the IYS data. And I think when we get to those numbers, we can feel that our, as Linda was saying, our tier 1 can really be a true tier 1. And it's not trying to solve a lot of problems that you would typically solve at a tier 2 level.
And I guess I'll back up. I mean, I really appreciate this work, and I really appreciate the fact that it's really more about how at tier 1, 2, and 3 I address the individual students and the individual issue from my standpoint. But from a school standpoint, we look at how we're doing. I guess I'd like us to be a little bit tighter with these numbers to hold ourselves accountable at a macro level. That we're making progress, not just in the really important improvements at the student level, but at a macro level. And I know we are, but I think we could be a little tighter.
Yeah, I think that's really a good point. And actually, some of these that are in the heart of what you just mentioned was something I wanted to throw out. That obviously the purpose of this presentation is to understand how the whole system is designed to work. And the data that we pulled in here was to help illustrate kind of where we are from a contextual perspective. But in order to fully provide all the information that you're talking about to really contextualize this data, a different presentation is needed, right?
Yeah, and I think partly just for me as a layman who doesn't, who struggles to kind of really understand the details of what we've got here. How do you explain it to me? And how do you explain it to me that we're doing well? So anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah, so I'll beat the dead horse on the context, but I would
definitely more for the presentation to understand, are we doing better or worse? Are the students feeling better or worse about the place in school from a year ago compared to prior years? Another danger is to try to, an overreaction to a short-term trend. What's the bigger picture? What are some contextual things that might help explain the numbers? Another thing that comes to mind as I look at all of this and think about the emotional health, the well-being of all of our students and all of our staff in general, is as we go into the fall and hopefully some close resemblance to normalcy, what are some of the opportunities that this window presents that we'll never get again? Hopefully we won't for at least 100 years, right? So, is it, what are some contributing factors that could really with the aiming of start time? And so is there something there to, is there an opportunity once a week or some periodic basis to give more sleep? And what's the role of sleep in terms of well-being? So again, I realize there's a lot of moving parts to that and not necessarily looking for a reaction right now, but that's something I just want to encourage our staff to really think through is if there's a time to really be bold and come to the board in the summertime or whatever time is right, this would be it. At least consider it. And I would hate for us to miss an opportunity to at least dig through all of
it. So I'll let Gina go truly last and I'll comment in between here. Yeah, I mean, I echo my board colleagues in terms of the quality of the presentation. So thank you very much for all of your hard work. And I really enjoyed seeing something from so many members of the team. I thought that was a great way to do it. So thank you. But those numbers are truly not good. So I would be interested in seeing what prior year survey looked like, right? Just to get a better sense of if that, how bad it is. I don't need to be overly dramatic, but that is really disturbing. So that was what really rocked my is about the things we're doing this at home. So Gina, did you want to comment?
I just appreciate all the comments of our, can you hear me? All the comments from my colleagues on the board. And thank you all for this report. It was similar but different than what we got at CCB. And so I appreciate some of the feedback that you got from us that definitely shows in this report. I just want to talk about the data for a second because I don't know how meaningful that data is post-pandemic. We have a whole different thing going on now. So I'm really appreciative of being someone who manages an MTSS behavior system. I'm really appreciative of the way your system is set up and the pieces for, making sure that the students who have the needs get them. And also being a person who does this same work, what I find is that having the system is different than making sure the kids actually get in it. So one of my pieces of just concern, what I'd love to see as you all are moving through this process over the next year or so is really the relationship with the teachers and the education support professionals that you have in your building, because I know that the impact of those two together and how they work, how important their input and participation in the MTSS system is. And the feedback loops that happen within those processes, right? With the students, your social workers, the teachers, the families, like that whole process. So I'm appreciative of that. I'm looking forward to seeing what that might be. And I'm also thinking that, like has already been said about the data that demonstrates that piece, we didn't really get that disaggregated by race, I don't believe. And I wonder what that might look like, as well as if we were to look at, were to look at gender nonconforming or students who are non-binary, because I know that there's aspects of MTSSB support and social emotional support that for those students is even greater. So I thank you for the report, honestly. When I love what you all do and have done with this. So thank you. I know that a lot goes into it. I know that it's intensive, and I'm looking forward to actually hearing more as you move through this process together and in partnership with the teachers. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next discussion item, it's one that I brought. So over a year ago now, we adopted policy 2:230, which is now linked to the packet. I want to bring it up. But it's concerning public comment. And so one of the things we noticed, probably in part because of had a lot this year, right? So we've seen an uptick in public comment. And the reason that I'm bringing this is not because we want to limit public comment. You know, certainly hearing from our community is part of, like, one of the best parts of our community, because being this engaged and being this invested in our schools, it's how we ensure that we continually are improving our processes and helping our students. However, we also have board business that we do need to get to. So I wanted to bring this in tonight, just so that the board can have a discussion about how, or if we want to utilize some of the mechanisms that are embedded in this policy for public comment. Specifically, there is an allowance for a minimum 20-minute total length of time for any one subject, or an overall minimum of 30 minutes. So we've never enforced that portion of this. We've never constrained public comment in any way that I know of since I've been on the board, at least. But this is an option. So I did want to have a public discussion because I felt it was important for us to make this decision as a board together and publicly as to whether that's something we want to consider. So I'm just opening that for discussion. There's no need for any action at this time. I just wanted to get the board's thoughts. So I don't know who would like to begin. Matt?
I'd have.
Gina, either?
Yeah, sure. I'll comment. The one piece about this that concerns me is I do not want to in any way diminish the voice of our public, of our constituents and the folks who are in our community. That piece for me is really critical and important. And at the same time, last meeting we sat through an hour and we sat and listened for an hour and a half, and we've had another meeting where we sat and listened for 3 hours. It seems extensive. I wonder, as we're thinking about how systems change, how could this feedback be done differently? I'm not saying I'm for or against what we're doing. I'm just wondering, when we have that level of input, what are we missing that is needing to be addressed? And are there other ways for us to provide that space for the folks of our fabulous community to have the opportunity to speak? So it's extensive, and our meetings do get very long, and it does get very challenging to be 100% at midnight. So I'm open to hear I'm looking forward to hearing what my colleagues on the board think. I just want to be very mindful of not diminishing anyone's voice. It's something that I stand for in all the areas that I'm in. So I had to at least express that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. And I just to further add another nuance, I think, Gina, you raise a really good point about what other ways can we solicit input, or how else can we structure this. So I want, as folks are commenting, for them to be sort of thinking about that too. So Matt, I think you had something.
Yeah, well, first I have a point of clarification. Is the policy 2230 says a minimum of 30 minutes and a minimum of 31 subjects. Do we actually mean maximum?
No, the idea was that we would allow at a minimum that amount or less, right?
Oh, right.
If there are fewer commenters.
Right.
So it would not allow us to abridge it and say we're doing 5 minutes of public comment and that's it.
Got it. And I mean, tonight it feels like what we're starting to discuss in more earnest is whether to have a maximum, right, of some kind that we impose. And one of the things that the last year has really shown is, first, people are much more apt to submit comments through email. and have our wonderful board secretary and some other staff members assist in reading it. And that's a lot easier to do than to show up and physically present in front of a board, just the commitment that takes. So I do think that post-COVID, that to some degree, that will help minimize the length of some of this input. And not that we're seeking to minimize it, but just to really concentrate it on those who really feel so strong. And so that's something else I think also consider is there something about what we've done during this era that we want to keep, right? Is it for people to submit comments that we incorporate into the minutes of the meeting, but they aren't necessarily read? You know, is there a word count limit that we want to prescribe for that, just for the sake of just realistic people's attention span and so forth? So I think there's some potential for a hybrid to consider of people submitting. Another thing to consider is, you know, maybe 3 minutes is longer than is necessary for quite a bit. It's more active to encourage people to keep it down. Maybe if we have a certain number of commenters on a given night, we say, you know, tonight it's not a 3-minute max, it's going to be whatever, 90 seconds or 2 minutes based on the shirt. Just do the math on that. So I think we're all for hearing from our neighbors and community members, but it's just a matter of managing and balancing against our own stamina. And so, you know, I mean, I will say if there's a viewpoint that a group of people share, and since I'm speaking on behalf of and read a list of names of people, I think it's to trust board members, and I guess I'm just saying this to the public, trust that we will like imagine, okay, times 5, times 10, and not have to sit through a lot of redundancy that can really be pretty counterproductive and unproductive for everyone involved. So, so those are just some of my thoughts at this point, and I'll turn the floor to whoever else at this point to discuss. I know we're not making a decision tonight. Obviously, this is just to get the ball rolling. How many minutes? My comments with us. The only time.
So not just so like 3 points based upon what you said. One, I would encourage us to think about continuing the ability to email submissions, because I do think that increases accessibility for those who are not able to be here in person for reasons of health or whatever. So I don't know that I would encourage that so much. I mean, I know it's not up to me, but just as myself. The second issue is that some of your suggestions, while I think are totally valid, would require amending the policy, right? So I think we need to be cognizant of that. And then the third point that I wanted to make concerning your comments, I have forgotten. So whoever else wants to comment on this.
I'll take a shot. I had a couple of comments. I agree, you know, the goal is not to stifle or minimize the voice of the community. But at the same time, I can tell you firsthand that we've had items on our agenda where it's been after midnight and we needed to have a more robust debate and deliberation on the topic, but I was out of gas. And so we're doing ourselves a disservice to our board work when those things happen. And, you know, if we want to give service to the work that we're supposed to do, we need to allow time. So that to me is what the motivating factor to make change. 2, it has been different in the pandemic where we've had write-in versus in person. It certainly has, you know, and we've seen 100 different comments, and some of them are the same letter with a different, you know, it's a form version, and that takes a lot of time. So I don't think that's, I think I got the message earlier. But even though I say that, we've had this discussion prior to the pandemic. So it's not a pandemic only issue. I think the policy we have can cover what we need in terms of it. It shapes it well. We just need to figure out how to put it in place. You know, I know even many of the public comments that we receive via email, we receive emails as well. And maybe people don't believe that we don't read our emails. I read those emails. But so we need some way of balancing these things, but I am in support of limiting the time so that we can do our work.
Sarah, I will weigh in.
Yes.
We have had times, I think this year with remote and email is a little more challenging, given that not only are we getting more public comments, which I don't have an issue with, but someone reading them and the time, it's hard to know what that would look like if the person is actually reading and we're doing it that way. And it's also easier when we're in person to be able to make the comment that if your comment has already been made, feel free. And we've had people say it's already been made. I think structuring it where we've done this before by topic, so that we are able to kind of lump things together. And we had a practice, we haven't needed it this year, but with making sure that our students, there was a separate sign-in sheet for our students and we heard them first. So I think those things should be extended. And I agree with Tom that our the structure of the policy allows for us to make changes. And we have done that before, where we saw that there were a lot of people signing up, and we said it ahead of time. Public comments are going to be 2 minutes as opposed to 3, given the number. I would like to see something in place that does speak to the form letter approach, which is being read the same thing over and over, does take away, detract from the role of the meeting, which is the business meeting of the board. So if there is a way, if people want to email Matt's suggestion of the petition, like where all the names associated with it, and that has been done. Actually, it's been done most effectively, I'd say, by our students. But I do agree that when we run into hearing the same comment, even though it's being given by a different person, that it takes away from what we need to do. But we can register all of those comments as opposed to having to make sure that everyone is read out loud, but that we still can register those. And that there will be times when there is a need to reduce the time limit. That's part of the policy. That is something that can happen, but we have to be able to be, I guess, willing to do that.
I think, everybody said kind of the same things that I'm thinking here is, it is really important to hear what the community has to say, but it's also important that, that we're not in our third meeting of the month and it's way in the morning because we're not effective at that. It's easy for maybe somebody to say, well, you should just have another meeting, but that's really difficult as well. So I think the trick is in, enforcing our own policy around limiting time. And yes, I really think we need to do something about this duplication issue, which has been made very easy by different media, and it's not really productive. But I'll just leave it at that.
Ralph, did you weigh in? I don't think so.
Nothing to add. I think everybody summarized the issues well. I agree. Very important to listen to the community, but also very important to have a rational amount of time to work on our primary responsibilities in board business. And so we have to find a balance that's better than the one we've had today. So I just echo the prior comments and don't need to talk at length.
And I remembered my point that I was gonna make after Matt spoke. So I don't think we need an action item, right? Because the policy exists. I think we just need a decision on how we're going to enforce the policy. In terms of how we structure it, I mean, I feel pretty strongly that we need some sort of standard that we enforce consistently, right? Because I would hate for an issue to flare up in the community and for it to be seen as though we're being arbitrary or punitive in how we're enforcing the time limits. So I would like for us to think seriously about how we are going to go about structuring a fair process that allows for everyone to feel heard and not for certain issues to get less time than other issues, or for this to be administered in some sort of arbitrary, capricious way. So
can I suggest something? Before COVID, at least in my time on the board, we did not have emailed statements that were read by Gail or others, correct?
Right.
And now that we're having meetings in person, and there's lots of empty chairs here, I mean, we're spread out safely. I think the question becomes not if, but when we go back to, if you want to get a statement to us, or make a public comment, it has to be a public comment, literally, you come and speak. Now, for those who want to, and so here's where I feel like there's a change or a potential change in an improvement is, for those who want to still submit, people can always email us, and a lot of people know this. We can exercise that liberally. But maybe an element is to say, okay, if you send a comment that you want us to designate for a certain portion of our website and in our minutes, do so, but we're not going to read it at the meeting. And we can draw attention to it at each meeting, perhaps, by saying, a reminder, here's a link, here's statements, board members are apprised of these updates, and board members, our part of our role is to read those. That is maybe the rough contours of what we might want to go to, because I feel like committee open have all the students in the school that want to be here many days, if not all days. And so it's time for us as a board and for the next constituted board to really go this direction. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I actually am just a little concerned about that statement, just because some people are not, I wouldn't want to limit someone who feels uncomfortable coming in from getting the opportunity to share. I just feel like that would be, there's a level of exclusion in that. There may be people who want to share but don't have the vaccine, don't have the ability to get up here right now because they're working at home and their kids are whatever, like we're in the pandemic. So I'm just concerned about that as a way of being. It feels a little bit exclusionary.
I just want to offer a solution on the form letters that we get. That as they come in and we begin to see them, they just saying like, you could actually take the names of those individuals and say John Jones, Denise, the name, all submitted letters such as this, and then just read that letter one time. That may reduce some of that. Other things that have been done have been when you have a cluster. Some boards will say we've received quite a few public comments on the topic of what type of wax to put on the floor. We will allot X amount of time to address those, but please know, public, that we will respond to you right within this right time. And so that's been done as well. That's just two options. You have, it's not always that we have a lot of public comment, but what's standard, and it's not just here in Oak Park, that when it's a topic of community interest, that's when you get the bulk of your public comments. And so it kind of ebbs and flows, it's just not all the time. I think what we need to do is, I did tell board presidents, Bobby, I'd like to put on the future agenda item, is to really talk about the board items and the process for what those should look like. That may also shave off some time.
So I hadn't really expected to have a solution this evening, but I did want to get us sort of talking about it publicly so the community is aware. Sorry, the community is aware of what we're trying to do here. Perhaps when Dr. Pruitt Adams brings the item, which I think is going to be later this spring, about how we can sort of manage our agenda items differently. In the meantime, the board can sort of be reflecting on this and submit to me any suggestions that you'd like to see us pursue in terms of structure, time limit, email versus in person, or grouping by topic, et cetera. Let's see what we got. Okay, so our next item is an action item. And it is approval of the treasurer's bond. And this is, all right, so I move to approve the treasurer's bond Alliant for 1 year at a premium of $26,722 to be paid in fiscal year 2021. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Any questions from board members? All right, yeah, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Martyri?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Barron?
Yes.
Mr. Isley?
Yes.
And Ms. Dixon Snyder?
Yes. All right, our next action item is acceptance of a donation. One second here. Okay. So I move to accept the $9,000 donation made by the Alumni Association to the OPRFHS Theater Department. Is there a second?
Second.
I would like to express the gratitude of the board to the Alumni Association for making this very generous donation, especially in these times that we're in. I know the theater department really appreciates it. I don't know if Dr. Pruitt-Adams, if you could provide any additional information about how this money is going to be used.
I do not at this time.
Okay. All right. Well, we are extremely grateful. The Alumni Association Board has been very generous and has worked very hard over the years to not just support our students, but also to ensure that our alums have a thriving community that they can tap into as well. So thank you.
Sorry, if I could jump in. I think
Yeah.
the money is going, I think I maybe misheard just now, but this is to help ensure the streaming of the video editing and audio engineering for the working production of the theater department. So it's 4 different shows. So that's where it's going towards. And I believe this was instrumental in it even happening. As the liaison to the Alumni Association, I can attest to the the passion and the diligence and commitment that organization has.
Yeah, thank you. Any other board members want to make any comments?
Mr. Isley?
Yes.
Mr. Barron?
Yes.
Mr. Martyri?
Yes, and then thanks to the Alumni Association for this generous donation.
Ms. Harris?
Yes, did you hear me?
Mr. Krowski?
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
And Ms. Dixon Snyder?
Yes.
And I just want to be remiss, it is in the body of the item how they're going to utilize the funds.
Right, our next item is approval of school psychologist, associate web developer, and director of instructional technology positions. I move to approve the addition of 1 FTE for school psychologist and new positions of associate web developer and director of instructional technology, projected savings of $110,487. Is there a second?
Second, I'll second it.
We did hear about this at the committee of the whole. I don't know if board members have any questions or comments.
I have a comment. I just have a comment. My comment is that we are anticipating or expecting, as part of the superintendent goals, an assessment of our resources versus the adequacy model. And that will give us a picture of where we are, a much needed picture in my mind of where we are. And so I'm not in support of making moves today, when that is anticipated within days, to have a look. So I'm in opposition, not for what's here, but because I wanted to see where we are as we make our decisions.
I just, it's always the board's latitude to approve or not approve a position. But the presentation is due at the end of April. And we're in the midst of hiring season, and I'm not sure if on some of these, I don't think these will impact the release of probationary teachers. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that didn't impact the release of probationary teachers, which falls within the time frame.
And I had asked that question, so
Dr. Burns, can I ask a question of you? So if given, or maybe this is a question for Chris even, but the associate web developer position, presumably that is not specific to education, right? So it's not, it doesn't have the same hiring cycle.
It's IMRF, which is a different retirement system, right? Which you're asking, so it falls under a different window.
So it's not the same pool of candidates as you have in the academic situation. That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments from board members?
I have a question.
Yes.
It's Jackie. It's a question, we did start talking about this during the committee of the whole, and I concur with Tom about not putting the cart before the horse, appreciating hiring season, but think that we're so close that it would be nice, given this new evidence-based funding that we're supposed to be adhering to be able to align things. The question I have is about the school psychologist, and the last line of the description says there will be no additional costs associated with the recommended addition due to the reallocation of funds from the contracted position. So is that to say that the 0.7 FTE, we were paying as much for contracted position as we are going to pay for a permanent position at 1 FTE?
Yes, that's correct.
And that's all in, because for contracted, okay, that's interesting.
So
Thank you.
there's always an agency fee as well for any contracted position, so that's why the cost is higher than hiring directly.
Thank you. That was why I didn't understand. Thank you very much.
I do want to just note for the board that the item on the evidence-based funding is due at the regular board meeting in April. That's the way the goals were written. And so that would mean that to come back for approval for this item would be at the end of May. I just want to put that out there, and that's the reference I made with hiring season. Because the bulk of the quality people will more than likely be gone. That was my reference to hiring, is that trying to get the best of the best to do this work, particularly with the web developer, the psychologist, and the director of instructional technology. Those are key, I can't remember the term, hard to fill position. And so I want to put that out there. The other concern, this may not come across the way I wanted to, is we will also be educating possibly 3 to 2 board members who may not also be ready to make a decision. And so then we're into June. I just want to put that out there. It could be a snowball effect to putting this out today.
I also wanted to express specifically for psychologists that it's a very hard to fill position. And in May, I don't think that we'll be able to fill it. It's just not realistic. Director of Instructional Technology, if you remember, that's a direct swap for the currently vacant
director of the bookstore position. And we have been holding it vacant in order to reassess. So there is currently no direct oversight over the bookstore. That would be a gap as well if we wait until May.
Let me ask a question. Why does it wait till May? Why can't it be done at a special right after the meeting?
If the board is willing to do a special after the meeting in April, but we just got to talking about long agendas. I'm going through with board members finally. The agendas for April and May and June are heavy. They're heavy because of things that are required by law, heavy because of things that as a district, we do that or unique. And so that would be another thing for me. That's the board's desire. I just want to say that there is a regular meeting that night. But in the practice that the board has given us, unless they say we don't have to bring this one back again for that, is you don't want us to bring something for approval and not represent it. So are we saying that the 2 times we've already presented this will suffice? Or what happens? Are we saying that? I just want to make sure.
In my opinion, as one board member, we don't need to represent it. We might want to discuss it, but you've provided lots of information.
Okay.
I don't see a need to.
I just want to be clear.
Have a delay.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea to have a special meeting.
It wouldn't need to be one of this, because that's a regular board meeting they're talking about.
I believe Mr. King had
Sorry, just a quick point of reference. Although the web developer position does not come out of an academic pool of candidates, the director of instructional technology definitely does. So the hiring cycle on that going in closer we get to July, the smaller our pool of really robust candidates will be. Just wanted to have that in your mind.
Can you give me a sense, you or Roxana, maybe give me a sense of what is the hiring season? Like we talk about it, I know it's generally spring, but is there more defined time?
Yeah, usually at Breckton, correct me if I'm wrong, but normally seeing that opening up starting in April and going into the summer season in preparation for July fiscal year and the new academic. That's commonly what we see in the position rotations.
So April wouldn't be too out of line then if we held it on our meeting.
I've always been a proponent of hiring early to get the best of the best. That's just how I've always operated. If we post in April, that's posting at the end of April, so we're still in May.
Yeah. I'm just going.
And so and then I just want to put it out there that we may be able to fill these positions, we may not. And we really don't want to fill the positions with people who are not really qualified to do the job, just to fill the position.
Right, of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to add for the hiring season, so most positions are posted now, it's board made decisions on non-renewals of probationary teachers when registration is done. So now you will see the majority of positions. Some positions are posted early if it's known for sure that there is a retirement and that position will be needed. But now all the districts have completed their registration and staffing. So you will now, it's the time when all the positions are posted, and it depends on what the district offers. So the districts that have the vast ability to attract candidates will fill those positions early, and then we are left with what we are left.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Dr. Beard, are we talking about the April 22nd meeting? Is that when that tool is going to be brought? Or the regular board on the 22nd? Other board members, comments or questions?
I'm going to support it tonight because I see the tension. It's a tough call, but I'll be supportive of it too.
And I am too. I still stand by the cart before the horse in that this is an unusual time given the new funding formula. But I also want to respect the instructional pieces and don't want us to lag behind. So feel like lesson learned, but I will be in support.
Yeah, and I want to weigh in. So I agree with Dr. Moore and Matt, and I want to be clear. The one FTE school psychologist is an evidence-based practice. It's right in the evidence-based funding formula. So at least we know this position comports precisely with the statute that we have in Illinois. Director of Instructional Technology, I think, fits within there well too. The only thing that would be sort of a novel position is the associate web developer position, but I think we had a robust discussion on that at the board level. And my feeling at the end of that discussion was that the board was supportive. And I could be reading that wrong, but that was my feeling at the time. So I agree completely with Tom and Dr. Moore that it would be nice if we could wait and have the evidence-based analysis first and then make this decision. But I don't think the private sector market for these positions will allow us that luxury. And I think the good news is 2 of these 3 positions are evidence-based. So there are some positives here. So that is why I will ultimately be supportive.
Thank you. Any other comments from you? Right, then, will we call them roll, please?
Mr. Martyri. Ms. Martyri.
I had a problem unmuting to everyone's great glee. So yes.
Mr. Barron.
Yes.
Mr. Isaac.
No.
Ms. Harris.
Yes.
Yes.
That was a yes.
And Mr. Koski. Dr. Moore.
Yes.
And Ms. Dixon-Spivey.
Yes. Right. We have up now policies for second reading. We have policy 4:60 purchases and contracts. Is there any discussion on this item? All right, I move to approve policy 4:60 purchases and contracts as presented. There's a second?
I'll second.
Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Isaac.
Yes.
Mr. Barron.
Yes.
Ms. Harris.
Yes. 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 Did you hear me?
Yes.
Did Dr. Moore?
No, she didn't, but yes, I'm a yes.
And Mr. Martyri.
No.
And Mr. Koski.
Yes.
And Dr. Ms. Dixon.
Yes. All right, now we have policies for first reading. So these are the policies that we have recently drafted ourselves with the Rouse Creek amount of help. So I move to approve. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, and okay. So I move to approve the policies listed below for first reading, which is 4:182, which is face coverings. This is new to us, to our eyes this evening. Previously discussed, although not voted on in any way, are policy 2:240, board policy development. 4:10, fiscal and business management. 4:60, purchases and contracts. I'm sorry, the amendments to these policies have been previously discussed. And 6:15, school accountability. Is there a second?
Thank you.
All right, is there any discussion on these? I would note, we do have one down here. We have to put in time. Charles, I don't find it. Yes.
I would also like for the board, when we had the board meeting, we actually discussed some of the items being exhibits or procedures. There's quite a few down that lists specific steps that have to be taken. And those are more procedural in nature than in terms of policy. And if one should ever have to be changed or updated because it's not procedural, it would then have to be another policy revision. I just wanted to put that out because some of them step by step identify what should happen. And I would ask that the board consider making those exhibits for the policy or for the procedure, possibly the addendum, because I know the board wants to strengthen in that policy to be there. So my suggestion would be making it an exhibit.
And do you want to speak to which policies?
Yeah, they're on blue right now, so I'm trying to figure. There's, for example, under the policy reporting on attaining equity goals that is attached to school accountability. It actually says no less than once a year. It speaks to data points about reducing the gaps for achievement, eliminating statistical meaningful. All these components have to be a part of the presentation or the report that's being made. And so would think that that may be better served because it actually lists all those criteria that we are held accountable for the Illinois State Report Card that we cover in the State of the District and draft, and thought this might be better served as an exhibit of those things that are looked for in the report. And that's on that one. There's another one that I suggested possibly be exhibit for the same reason. And I believe it was the one with the contract, because it lists those, it's policy 4:60. And where it states specifically the date, at least X amount of dates before the board takes action. But then it also breaks down the rationale for why the vendor was selected, the evaluation criteria on the vendor, what work the vendor previously did with their other districts. It breaks down those look forward, those items that should be in the report. And I believe we'd be better served with that being an exhibit as well. If there's a need for change. Those are my two suggestions. And those are the only two where things were broken down so specifically in steps and components that I just felt that's more either procedural or exhibit.
Thank you. Ralph, I don't know if you want to speak to those.
Yeah, I do. I think actually it's better to have them in the policy because we have in these policies, the comments of my fellow board members over the last 2 years for things that have been consistently asked for that haven't been provided on a consistent basis. So I think having them just as a procedure or an amendment is not good enough. I think to ensure the kind of oversight the board has been asking for and the kind of data the board has been asking for, and this predates my time on the board. Some of these comments go back to, 3, 4, 5 years ago, requesting similar data sets and similar analysis and similar information and never getting it. So I think it'd be better to put it in our policies so that it's adhered to. And if at some time we need to adjust the policies going forward, then we just adjust them. That's something the board could certainly do. But at this juncture, I think clarifying expectations for both sides, clarifying the different elements that the board wants to ensure it gets good information on and has appropriate oversight over, and clarifying the kind of information the board needs to make these decisions as a policy of the district is a good thing. And it just creates a nice rubric for expectations for both sides. And if the rubric needs to be adjusted going forward, if there's any problem with it, then I think we just adjust the policy going forward.
Ralph, can I ask you about 4:60? Right now, we need to figure out, I was just wondering if you had a sense of it, I thought I'd start with you. How many days before board action is required we would want a summary of the contracts and expenditures? 7 days, 14 days? I think we need to put that in there before we.
Yeah, I think we need to put that in there. 14 days, 2 weeks is certainly enough time for any kind of review process. That seems like a reasonable period for me. The reason it was left blank, and here, Dr. Pruitt-Adams, is that a reasonable time for the administration? Because here, it's got to be something that's reasonable for the administration as well, that timing element. That's why that was left blank.
I'm going to defer that one to Cindy, because when you're talking about contract, we send them to legal, there's a lot that's been asked for. And are you saying the board have it 2 weeks before we bring it? Is that the question?
That we have it before action is required, right? So
Yeah.
several days before we're
Well,
voting.
that's the procedure right now that, which is one of the things I want to talk about with the agenda item. The way the board has asked us to operate now is to not bring anything forward on the same night for approval, but to bring it at the meeting previous to that, which would equate to 2 weeks. It's 14 days. So, yeah. Okay, so that's where we are now, so that might be 14 days.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
all right. Okay, so yes, let me just clarify. So in 4:160 under approval and accountability concerning board approved contracts and expenditures, first sentence, we should, it's at least 14 days before board action. And Gail for second reading, and yeah, make sure that's incorporated. Yeah, I'm sorry, Tom.
No, I have one suggestion, and this is a suggestion that I've raised, and I haven't seen it change, so I just need to know if I'm one voice that others disagree or if it's no minute.
Specifically in the evidence-based financial reporting, it is structured so that that tool is to be provided the same time as the operating budget. And I've been an advocate that this is really a planning tool, a pre-budget. If you're getting this in the budget, to me, don't seem to fit. So I would request that it be done prior to the budget. It should not be, one is a precursor to the other. That would be my input. How much before, 2 months, a month, I mean, it's a different season.
And just so that we're all clear with myself, we're looking at 4:10, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Business management, and then we're looking at
You're down at,
evidence-based financial reporting?
Yeah, it's where it's blue and then there's a couple for designatees. And then the last sentence just says, this is the timing. So it just addresses the when. So it's my input that it is not done at the time of the budget. It's done well before the budget, because you look at it, it's in my mind similar to our projection model and other things that you look at, and then you use those to then begin formulating what actions you need to take for the budget. So that's my input.
Yeah, Tom, I think that's great input. Do you have a suggested time period?
I would say 2 months beforehand. Okay, I'm saying it should be cycles. It should be off season type stuff.
Well, the question I have is we show you budget 3 times, show you preliminary, then we call it tentative, and then we do the adoptive.
Preliminary, before we begin talking about this is being more pre-preliminary.
Okay.
And you want 60 days before?
I'm just throwing a number out there, I'm just trying to say that it needs to be detached from a planning standpoint. Everything's.
You say prior to the preliminary budget.
Yes.
Being presented to the board.
Correct.
So you don't feel the need for a specific time period. I misunderstood it then.
Yeah, I mean, I would put at least a month, but you can, that's just my input. I don't know the details. I'm just trying to make a point. It is a planning tool that is kind of meant to give you a picture of things
so that then you begin having dialogue, and then that fabricates discussion. I was like,
Yeah, no, and I don't disagree, Tom, I think that is an excellent point, I just think that we should be specific about the timing.
yeah.
So I just wanted
A
to
week,
kind of work that
a week
out.
of month sounds good. Specific,
days.
that's cool.
What do other board members think, specifically those who are virtual?
I think that's fine, and I don't mind if it's even at least, putting that kind of language so it's not as prescriptive.
I agree.
So Gail, how do we amend it then? Do we hold it for tonight for first reading or no? Okay, so it's okay for us to make these sorts of things. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. All right, I think we can probably call them.
Oh, just may I ask, is it 1 month or 30 days or?
At least 30 days prior. Say at least 30
I
days.
think Dr. Moore's friendly amendment was the right one, right? At least 30 days prior. I think that makes a lot of sense. So it's not quite as prescriptive. So I thought her language was the best.
Yes.
Mr. Isaac? Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Kowski?
Yes.
Dr. Moore?
Yes.
You're voting on me if I need to test it. Yes.
Mr. Martieri?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, we're almost done. We're almost through. So, I'm sorry, the next on the information item, we chose to bring forward in a public meeting versus put it in the week notes. At the February 25th meeting, the board directed the administration to pick another set of classrooms from the alternate list, and so we wanted to present that publicly tonight. Thank you for information, Mr. Anderson.
So at the last meeting, we did accept, the board accepted, the B36 rebid, alternate 5, alternate 6B. So the board also approved an alternate C amount of $752,339. And that was to choose from alternate 6A, B, or C. And as Matt jokingly says, 6C, that actually was the one that we wanted to go with the 10 classrooms on the fourth floor. And a grand total of $863,000. Is there any questions about that?
Questions from the board?
I guess just wondering, what was it that caused it? Because it wasn't what I said. I don't know. Well, what were some of the factors that led to these 10 being the ones that were the best to move forward with?
Because the other two alternates had classes on different floors. So keeping those 10 classes on the same floor made it a lot easier.
Any other questions? Great, thank you. That concludes the item. Future agenda items. Yes, ma'am. The board, and you heard several times tonight about the length of board meeting. And the length of time we're in meetings, the length of items, the length of comments. And there's multiple things at play. There are items that, let me go back. Cal is more of a meeting where we get deep into the essence of items. And Cal has become so heavily packed. Those are the ones we're usually here to 12 or 1 o'clock. Especially this year, because there's a lot that's being added on. We have the regular standard items that are due to school initiatives, state guidelines, and so forth. However, because, and this is not a bad thing, so don't take the wrong way, the board's desire to learn and grow
we're adding those items as well to those meetings. And those are heavy lifting items we really need to talk. If you recall the last board meeting, we had a very in-depth conversation about the 2003 plan. That was over an hour and a half of the meeting. It was good conversation. I'm trying to show you how it's been presented. We were also directed, I think it was maybe late last year or early this year by the board to not bring any items for approval prior to bringing it to the board. So now we're bringing those items into town meeting as well. So if you notice, for the most part, there's very few items in the regular agenda. The count is massive. Then we pile on top of that the impact, all of the stuff that's happened because of COVID. That's also put on that. And so we've also been told from time to time there's not enough information in the items, and now we put more stuff into the item. And honestly, we feel compelled to do presentation in order for the board to really understand what we're talking about and for the community to understand the essence of what we're talking about. Tonight's presentation was 30, 40 minutes, one presentation, but it needed to be said. And so I would really like for us to have a conversation on what it is that the board really needs in a board package that's enough information to get the message across, so we're not spending hours and hours in here. The way it is now structured, also for staff with the realignment of CAL is 1 week we're doing agenda item review, the next week we're in the board meeting. Then we're doing agenda item review, the next week we're in the board meeting. So we're trying to crank out stuff where before we had sometimes a 3-week span, we now have a 1-week span. For example, today we had agenda item review for the April 8th meeting because of spring break. Other factors that play into that, there's so many factors that play into why the meetings are long. We presented to the board, I'm just giving you an example. We presented to the board a year and a half ago or so, the notion of the curriculum restructure. And we've made presentations on that as a whole over the course of time. And then it was referenced that historically, administration had given updates on each of the content areas. So now we're back to doing that. So at the next board meeting, we're going to hear about the history division. And then the next board meeting, we're going to hear about the English division. And then we're still going to be talking to you about the freshman restructure. We've gotten to the point where we're fragmenting some of our items. And you're hearing in so many different ways that then we sit in board meetings and we've not heard that. You don't know that. That's us just knowing how we're going through the recommendations for project 2 and how many times we brought that forward, but we still not succeeded. I said a lot of that to say there's a need with a new board, a new superintendent coming on board, for us to try to streamline that so that you're not sitting in meetings to 12 when your brains are not functioning and our brains are not functioning when we've been here since 7:30. So I would like that as an agenda item.
Absolutely. I mean, I will say that the hope or the intent of some of these policy revisions that we're making is to provide that framework so that the administration knows what's
asked for, which I'm hopeful will help, but I do think a more in-depth conversation is certainly warranted. Do we have any other future agenda items from board members?
Yes, remote summer school.
Or the thing that was talked about today and the how and the why of it, I would like to have on the agenda.
Okay. So I'm going to say this, and I want this to be, is this so that the public will get a lot? And I ask that because we've put it in the end of week notes a couple of times. We sent it out a couple of times to parents that it is the construction, it is the abatement, it is the emergency systems that are being put in. And when we first presented 2 years ago, or when we started the Imagine Plan, we talked about the fact that we would not be able to have summer school for the next 2 summers. So I'm just trying to understand.
I think the issue is that we haven't found an alternate site, which is what how it had been presented initially, right?
Well, no, I would say two things. One is, just to be clear, one is that what was presented 2 years ago was not when we were coming out of the pandemic. Fact. Okay, but the thing that was stated today was when the discussion, and when we, this is to bring the agenda item, was what I heard was the reason, you know, when we're looking at, are we looking at alternative ways? It was because our teachers are remote, and I don't understand how that fits in, and what commitments have been made by whom to that.
Okay. I hear that the comment today about teachers being remote was under the notion of the extended school years program for space. And a message was sent out about the facilities work and we would be remote due to construction. The concern was having, because teachers apply for summer school. And if the bulk of the teachers are teaching remote, will teachers really want to? We can still investigate that. I get that. I truly get it. I'm not negating that. But we reached out to Fenwick. We did do research about where we could hold alternative summer school times. And my question is, are you asking us to bring that back again as a report, a more updated report? I guess that's my question. And the summer school and the extended summer school program, right?
Yes, yes. And I'm still a little disturbed by the idea that faculty's expectation of being remote would be the barrier to, and I'm not saying that is a barrier, but like.
That's what was communicated as the barrier.
I get that, but that was, it. I don't really want to get into
No,
it.
we don't have to. I just want to clarify.
But there were other barriers that were noted. I don't want us, and I know that was said, but I want us to just focus on that because it was said that we reached out to Pilgrim Church. That's true. My understanding was the question was asked, did we reach out to 97? And while I was in here, I got a note that as we reached out to 97, then it was, the letter went out that we were going remote, so they got off from that. So I'm okay with us bringing an item. I'm just seeking clarity as to what it is that you are asking us to present that we have not already presented. And what I'm hearing is a comprehensive explanation of what is keeping us from being in our building this summer. Is that correct? And what other alternatives have we stopped to do? Yeah.
Yeah, and we, I mean, what options have been evaluated?
Got it.
And what are the barriers that are preventing us from, we know the barriers in the building, what are the barriers preventing us from serving our students in that class?
Right, so I don't think the issue is so much what's going on in the building, right? It's what other, is Julian available? Is Brooks available? Right, like I don't feel as though I have an answer to that. That's fine. All right, anything else from anyone?
Again, 2 weeks ago, I don't have a future agenda. I'll just start. 2 weeks ago, I asked about potential to have more students in the building. And I appreciate, and I know it wasn't prompted by my remark, it's been prompted by tons of developments nationally and locally in council. So I just want to thank you, Dr. Perez, and your team, continually being nimble, willing to just kind of tear up this draft and then go to the next draft and the next. And it's been a roller coaster year for a lot of places in this country. And in terms of being in school, we've not been on a roller coaster because we've had this real calibrated, careful approach. And I just, to the public, I'll say it's not a done deal that this is going to work out, because it's up to us as a community and families and students to continue to, follow these guidance, so we're wearing masks, keeping distance, washing hands. And so you've given us all as an institution an opportunity to succeed and finish this year well. And I'm confident the community will, the students will step up and finish well. I just want to thank you for your wisdom and restraint in moving carefully and not having us go on a roller coaster. So thank you.
Good team there. All right, anybody else, any other comments? All right, and we'll adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Have a great time off.
Oh, yeah, everyone's great, I'm great.
Yeah.